What happens when a superpower gets overconfident? Rome's biggest mistake, the Battle of Barbalissos. In 253 AD, a Roman army of 35,000 soldiers marched east toward the Euphrates, confident, disciplined, and completely unprepared for what was coming. That army was destroyed, not weakened, not retreated, destroyed. And Rome, the empire that recorded everything, said almost nothing about it. We know this battle happened primarily because the enemy carved it into stone. Shapur I of Persia left the record Rome refused to write. The Battle of Barbalissos is one of history's most underreported military catastrophes, and the reason it happened tells us something uncomfortable about power. Rome had spent 7 centuries building the most feared military force the ancient world had ever seen. That reputation was not exaggerated. It was earned. Roman legions conquered Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. They built roads through mountains and aqueducts across deserts. They turned civilization into a system. But that unbroken record of dominance quietly did something dangerous to Rome. It made Roman commanders stop taking the idea of total defeat seriously. When you have never truly lost, you stop building mental frameworks for losing. You stop asking the question, what if this enemy is different? By the 250s AD, Rome was already fracturing. Historians call this era the crisis of the 3rd century, and that name barely captures how bad it was. In roughly 50 years, Rome cycled through over 20 emperors. Most of them were assassinated. Political instability had become Rome's permanent condition. Plague was tearing through Roman cities. Germanic tribes were pushing hard from the north. The empire was fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously with no stable leadership. And yet, even inside this chaos, Rome mobilized a massive eastern army and marched toward Persian territory with the same confidence it always had. That confidence was not irrational. It was historical. Rome had faced crises before and absorbed them. The machine kept moving. It always had. But the machine was about to face something it was not designed for. A general who had studied it, mapped its weaknesses, and built an army around exploiting them. Shapur I was not a typical frontier king looking for raids and tribute. He was building an empire of his own, and Rome was the obstacle in his way. What made Shapur genuinely dangerous was his refusal to fight Rome the way Rome expected to be fought. He had no interest in matching Roman discipline with discipline. He built his military strategy around speed, mobility, and flexibility. The exact qualities Roman legions were not structured to handle under pressure. Roman battlefield dominance depended on formation, coordination, and communication. Disrupt any one of those 3 things, and the entire system begins to break down. Shapur understood this. His plan at Barbalissos was not to beat Rome in a fight. It was to make sure there was never a fair fight at all. When Roman forces approached the Barbalissos region along the Euphrates, Persian forces did something that Roman commanders completely misread. They pulled back. Small skirmishes, probing attacks, then withdrawal. To Roman eyes, this looked like hesitation. It looked like an enemy that was not ready to commit. So Rome advanced, pushed deeper into Persian-controlled territory. Supply lines stretched, flanks thinned. The army moved further from any position of defensive strength. This is the mechanics of a trap, and it only works if the target is too confident to notice it is being led somewhere deliberately. Rome walked in without hesitation. Every step forward was exactly the step Shapur had planned for. The Romans were not pursuing a retreating enemy, they were being positioned. When Shapur finally struck, Roman commanders had no time to process what was happening. The attack came from multiple directions with no single clear front to respond to. Fast cavalry hit the flanks simultaneously. Persian forces applied pressure from every angle at once. The Roman formation, built for linear battle, had no answer for this. Roman legions were extraordinary at coordinated defense and structured advance. But that coordination required clear communication between units, and communication requires order. Encirclement destroyed the order almost immediately. Units lost contact with each other. Officers could not see the broader picture. The army fractured into isolated pockets. Each pocket fought alone. Each pocket was destroyed. The battle was not a long struggle. By most historical accounts, the collapse was shockingly rapid. Rome's greatest tactical strength, the ability to function as a single coordinated machine under pressure, failed the moment the pressure came from everywhere at once. When it ended, somewhere between 3,000 and 35,000 Roman soldiers were dead. There was no organized retreat, no rear guard, no survivors regrouping beyond the battlefield. Equipment was abandoned. The dead were left unburied. The eastern frontier, which Rome had held and fortified for generations, was now essentially open to Persian advance. The military loss was enormous, but the psychological damage went even deeper, because this was not how Rome was supposed to lose. Rome was not supposed to lose like this. And then Rome did something that in hindsight reveals just how badly this shook the empire. It went almost completely silent about what had happened. Roman historians of the era wrote around Barbalissos. Vague references, minimal detail, nothing approaching the kind of account Rome typically kept of its military campaigns. The most complete record of the battle comes from Shapur's own inscription at Nakhche-Rostam in modern Iran, carved in 3 languages to make sure nobody missed it. Shapur listed the Roman forces destroyed, the territories taken, and the humiliation delivered, in precise, proud detail. Rome's silence only makes his record louder. Historians debate whether this silence was intentional, a deliberate suppression of a catastrophic loss, or simply the chaos of records lost during the 3rd century instability. But either explanation tells the same story. Rome, for the first time in centuries, had suffered something it did not know how to publicly process or absorb. The eastern frontier began to collapse almost immediately after Barbalissos. Persian momentum was real, and Rome had nothing in position to stop it from rolling forward. Cities along the Euphrates that had operated under Roman protection for generations found themselves suddenly exposed. The regional power balance shifted within a single year. Shapur did not slow down. He had broken something, and he knew it. He continued pushing west and north, and Roman resistance in the east crumbled steadily. Then came the event that completed the psychological destruction of Roman invincibility, an event so unprecedented that the ancient world struggled to process it. In 260 AD, Emperor Valerian personally led a Roman army east to confront Shapur. He was captured alive in battle, the first Roman emperor ever taken prisoner by a foreign enemy. 7 centuries of Roman history had produced no moment like it. No enemy had ever done this. The image of Rome as something untouchable, something above ordinary defeat, was gone. Shapur reportedly used Valerian as a footstool when mounting his horse. Whether this is historically confirmed or legendary, the symbolism was understood by every civilization watching. None of this began with Valerian. The chain of events traces directly back to Barbalissos, to the moment Rome sent its best army east and never got it back. So why did Rome really lose? Not because it lacked soldiers, not because its men were cowardly. Rome lost because it was still fighting the war it already knew how to win. Shapur brought a completely different framework, and Rome's commanders, trained on centuries of Roman dominance, genuinely could not adapt in real time to something they had not anticipated. Overconfidence created rigidity. Rigidity created vulnerability. Vulnerability, when met by a prepared and adaptable enemy, created catastrophe. The sequence is always the same. Internal political collapse meant no stable general was reading the strategic picture clearly. Decisions were being made by men whose authority was temporary and whose focus was divided. Rome's greatest asset, its institutional memory and disciplined structure, became its greatest liability the moment the enemy decided to attack the structure itself. This pattern does not belong only to Rome. Every dominant system in history eventually faces the same crisis. Long success creates comfort, and comfort creates the blind spots that end empires. Shapur's tactics, avoid direct confrontation, disrupt communication, attack from unexpected angles, force the enemy to fight on unfamiliar terms, are studied in military strategy to this day. What defeated Rome at Barbalissos was not superior Persian numbers or superior Persian courage. It was superior Persian thinking, applied against a force that had stopped thinking critically. Barbalissos was not just a battle, it was the moment the Eastern Roman world began to come apart, and the silence Rome left around it made the damage worse, not better. The psychological superiority Rome had carried for centuries, the belief that made enemies surrender before combat, died on that battlefield along the Euphrates in 253 AD. Everything that followed, the emperor's capture, the collapse of the eastern frontier, the accelerating decline of Roman authority in the region, it all flows back to this one day. To one army that marched in expecting routine victory. That did not ask the right questions. That trusted its history more than it read its present situation. Empires do not fall because they are weak. They fall because they believe, completely and without question, that they cannot be defeated.